Tuesday, April 26, 2022, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to look at the crazy things that happened during a hyperinflation. Before I start though, I like to talk a little bit about the LME, the London Metals Exchange. There's been a lot of talk that they've discontinued their gold and silver contracts. Some people are making a big deal out of that, and I think that's not really a big deal. And why is that? Well, first of all, just wanted to say I was a futures and options broker in the city of London for about 20 years. So I know a thing or two about the futures industry. And one thing I can say is that some contracts are really bigger than others, of course. You know, they trade more, there's more volume, more open interest. Those are kind of like the champion contracts. And there are also exchanges where they have a contract that no other exchange has because they've captured that. People are used to that trading on that exchange. And even though I'm not a fan of gold futures and the COMEX, gold futures is associated with COMEX. It started back in 75, and it's where I would say 99.9% of all futures, if not 100% of all futures in the world is traded, and it's on an exchange. There are derivatives of gold that are traded over the counter, of course, and that's not in an exchange, and that's different. So I remember many exchanges trying to copy other exchanges' contracts. They succeeded for a few months or maybe a year, but eventually they would discontinue that. The term for that was they took it off the board because in the old days on the floor of the exchange, you had the pits, then you had the boards with the prices and the contracts that were trading. So they took it off the board because what's the point of having a contract on the exchange if no one's going to go there and play ball? Or it's like no one's going to go to the circus to watch the show. So you discontinue it. So there's nothing really to do with the underlying fundamentals of the gold market, the fact that LME is discontinued gold and silver. Yes, LME has had trouble with nickel and could have trouble with other metals that it trades. And the LME, by the way, is mostly an industrial base metal exchange. So I went into the LME website yesterday, and you can see here, there is a bit of open interest, but a tiny open interest. Like for the gold contract, I think it's just over 100 contracts. Silver the same. And you can see here for, it looks like this is a monthly chart. No volume, no volume for gold or silver. So that's why they've discontinued gold and silver on the LME, because it doesn't trade. There's no point having the contract there, and it probably costs the exchange some money, and the exchange of course has been in trouble. So it's all part of that, but no one really, even in London, and I did trade gold futures for clients and silver, even though it wasn't the bulk of my business. We did it on COMEX, not on the LME, and I think these LME contracts were only about 5 years old. So I would say that if a new futures contract doesn't work in the first year, you should discontinue it. It was like a new Coke. They brought new Coke out in the 80s. That didn't work out. They discontinued it. So back to crazy things during a hyperinflation. The reason I'm talking about that is because it's interesting what happens during a hyperinflation, but I think maybe it will help you to kind of determine whether we are on the road to a hyperinflation. This is, I guess, the symptoms of a hyperinflation, the crazy things. And before I start, I'd like to recommend a couple of books which are really good in terms of seeing what happens in a hyperinflation. The first one is Fiat Money Inflation in France, which is about the period during revolutionary France in the 1790s, where they tried an experiment with money printing with the assignats, and it led to the collapse of that currency. It led to hyperinflation, which is the collapse. Prior to that, though, prices were going up. The crazy things that were happening during that period, and I know it was a revolutionary period. They chopped the king and queen's head off with the guillotine. They had the reign of terror, political uncertainty, crazy things, right? Things are not normal anymore. What else did you have? Well, you have government trying to stop people from using what they want as money. You could go to jail and be killed for using real money or silver during that time. So here's a book. You can find a free PDF online. What other crazy things went on? Well, people were speculating, people were gambling. And why is that? Well, because the currency that they earned from work didn't pay. So they stopped working and they gambled because there was a lot of liquidity in the system, a lot of speculation, and also the price of real things were going through the roof. So people were better off speculating. Those were one of the crazy things that were happening. Is it that happening today? Well, you look around yourself and maybe consider that. I think some of it is. The other thing that was crazy, and I know this is present all throughout history, is wealth inequality, but it goes into overdrive, and I think that's happening now. The wealth inequality. You have people now, billionaires, spending what people will not even earn in a lifetime to buy some frivolous luxury good. And the same thing happened then. You know, it was at the time when Marie Antoinette, who lived in luxurious splendor, said, "Let them eat cake," right? It's the same kind of crazy things that happen. So the next book, and we'll talk a little bit about the crazy things that happened within the context of the next book, and it's When Money Dies. It's a classic, The Nightmare of the Weimar Hyperinflation by Adam Ferguson. Recommend that as well. I'm not sure if there's a free PDF. There is definitely a free PDF for that one. So crazy things that were happening in Germany. Well, it didn't just start in 1923. That was the culmination when the currency collapsed. And the thing about hyperinflation is that it starts with normal inflation where prices are rising because the currency is dropping in value. And then when people realize that the monetary and governmental authorities are not going to do anything to stop the inflation, because it's government and the central bank that create inflation after all, because it's a creation of money and credit facilitated by the central bank so that governments can get money for nothing or currency for nothing and spend. And that drives up prices. And when people realize they're not going to stop that and they're destroying the currency that people are forced to use, they start moving away from the currency, and it's got nothing to do with spending habits. They just want to get rid of the currency for anything that's real, anything that has value, and that's when the hyperinflation kicks in. I don't think we are there yet, and I know the Fed and other central banks are now trying to rein in the monetary policy. I'm not sure they will succeed. It's still, the verdict is still out. So what crazy things happened in Germany? Well, you had people paying for things. They needed a wheelbarrow of cash. The other crazy things that happened is that if Herr Schmidt got paid at 1 p.m., his wife would come to his factory or office, take the money that he got paid with and go shopping, because if they waited to shop the next day, his wages would not cover the costs. That's the kind of crazy thing that happened then. Is it happening now? Not as bad, I would say, but some prices are changing quite quickly. What other crazy things happened in Germany? Well, and they're not really great things, these crazy things, I would say. Moral compass of society really deteriorated. Respectable families, their daughters had to resort to the oldest profession because they couldn't make ends meet. And morals went down the drain because the currency went down the drain. And why does that happen? Well, because the currency, or money, if you want to call it that, but really it's the currency, is the flip side of every commercial and also transaction, I would say, in a modern society where there's indirect exchange. So if one side of the transaction is tainted, the whole society becomes tainted. So those are the crazy things that happen. I guess what's going on today with the woke society and some of the crazy things people are resorting to or talking about and thinking of doing, and I'm not going to go into it. That's part of that. And before I go and look at the markets, just one more thing that happens in the hyperinflation. We get a lot of shortages, and we are seeing shortages now, of course. Am I saying we're in a hyperinflation yet? No, but there are some signals out there. And the other thing I would say is that quality of goods goes down the drain. And a lot of goods in Germany, not just during World War II, but during the Weimar hyperinflation, they were called ersatz. They were not real because they couldn't get the real thing. So quality drops really fast. I'm not sure if they got shrinkflation during the Weimar hyperinflation. They probably did in the run-up. That's where you charge the same price for something, but you shrink the product. And just one last thing, debt. I think a lot of people ask me, isn't it good to have debt during an inflation and even a hyperinflation? Yes, that's a double-edged sword because if you're not able to service that debt in the run-up to the hyperinflation, you're going to lose your asset, and you're going to have to, you're going to have to default. So yes, it is good because inflation writes off debts, but only if you have a steady income and you're almost 100% sure that that's going to keep coming. So there you go. With that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. Is 20 past 8 a.m. London time. Right now we've got spot gold actually trading exactly at 1900. It's up just over $2. High has been 1907 and the low 1895. Silver is up 3 cents at 23.64. High has been 23.94 and the low 23.56. Stock market, yes, yesterday I said the markets aren't unhinged, and I meant all the markets. I didn't say just the stock market. Stocks, bonds, precious metals, commodities, they're kind of unhinged, and by that I meant also a lot of volatility. And we finished up yesterday in the stock market, but right now the Dow futures down 150, the Nasdaq is down 88, and the S&P 500 is down about 20 points. FTSE is up 21. To the currencies, sterling has continued to drop here. It's down 0.2%, 127.14. The euro is down a quarter at 106.86. And the dollar is actually down versus the yen, 0.25%, 127.81. The dollar is up 0.1% versus the yuan at 6.58. And the dollar is unchanged versus the Swiss franc, just below 96.00. Aussie dollar, unchanged, 71.84. The dollar is unchanged versus the Canadian dollar, and the Kiwi dollar is up slightly. And now to the general commodities. WTI crude is up 0.25% at 98.34. Brent is up 0.5% at 102.40. And high-grade copper is up slightly at 4.47. And quickly to the bond market, yields dropped fairly sharply yesterday. So all the volatility still, they could go up 10 basis points today. Who knows? But right now we're at 282, the 10-year yield, down 1 basis point. So what do I think about the markets? The craziness. I don't really see a stock market crash, even though I think we are in a bear market now for the general stock market. And I think we are in a bull market longer term for commodities and precious metals. And I guess what we're seeing right now is like a shakeout or a correction of the miners, of commodities, and also the bullion. Because if you look at year-to-date numbers, for example, GLD is still up 5%. SLV is up still 3% year-to-date. GDXJ is still up 7%. GDX still up 14%. And the CMOD or Invesco Bloomberg Commodity Index is still up 25%. And if you look at the stock market indices, the major indices, the Dow's still down 6.3% year to date. S&P is down just under 10%. And the NASDAQ is down just under 17%. So that's where I see things right now. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. And think about subscribing to this channel if you haven't yet. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.